All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome. We're so excited that you're here and part of this great new experience with us. Dave, we've got Facebook Live, YouTube Live, and I'm broadcasting live on Instagram on my own. This is crazy.
It is crazy. It's amazing how many platforms you can reach at one time now. It used to just be Facebook Live, and it's pretty cool that we can do all these other platforms.
I'm really excited. I'm a little nervous because as we throw more in, there's more chance for hiccups to happen. But for this whole piece, I'm just really excited that you're here talking about retirement again, Dave. I feel like this topic, we can never talk about it enough.
No, there's so much information that needs to be shared out there. There's so many questions that people have that it's very important that we get this information out there to help people get to the retirement they're looking for.
And it's really important that we reach out to as many platforms as we talked about before that we can reach out through Instagram, through Facebook, through YouTube, and soon we'll be adding LinkedIn. We want to make sure that everybody hears you, Dave, from all different platforms, from all over the place, because this topic is so important. And plus, we don't give it enough credit because we wait till the last moment before we really put money into retirement.
Yeah, everybody waits way too long, or the majority of people. They just wait too long to really plan for the retirement. So it's very important that we cover these issues to help people get started, to incent them to make the changes they need to make, have the knowledge they need to be able to make those decisions and to be able to keep them moving forward.
Exactly. And so today, Dave, we're have everyone ask their retirement questions, and then we're going to go through and answer those. I've got a list of those right now that we're going to go through and answer. So if you're joining us for the first time, I have a list of 10 or 11 questions we're going to go through, but I encourage you, if you're here live, to come on and ask your retirement questions. And Dave, so are you ready to get started with the show?
Yes, let's get going.
All right. So our first question that we have is coming from Peter today. And Peter asked, what is a piecemeal internal Roth conversion?
Yeah, so what he's talking about here is when you have an annuity, which 95 to 99% of people who have annuities have them in the taxable or the tax deferred bucket, primarily. And when you have those in that bucket, you're subjecting yourself to tax rate risk. So you can do a Roth conversion, and the old system was that you had to do it all at once. Well, when you do a conversion all in 1 year, it's going to cost you tens of thousands, if not maybe even hundreds of thousands of dollars in tax. So there are companies out there now, annuity companies, that will allow you to do it over a period of time. You can do that conversion just as you would with your stock or mutual fund investments. So it's a great option out there to be able to use the annuity to eliminate longevity risk, but get it into that tax-free bucket so you can also eliminate tax rate risk.
And Dave, where does this piecemeal internal Roth conversion come from? Where does that stem from?
Yes, this is a term that was coined by David McKnight in his new book, Tax-Free Income for Life. He talks all about the internal Roth conversion, the piecemeal internal Roth conversion, and he coins this term there. The book's not coming out until November, but you can pre-order it now. It's a great book talking about how you can get the tax-free and risk-free retirement.
That's awesome. Well, Dave, I've got the next question coming from James. And James says, is there a waiting period for the spouse to qualify for Medicare after marriage?
I'm glad you asked this question because there's some misunderstanding oftentimes about these spousal benefits, especially when we're talking about Medicare, the way that it works. We have a situation like this. No, there is not. Now, for Social Security, you do have a 1 year waiting period before you can get Social Security benefits based upon a spouse's record, or 9 months after you pass away. But for an individual who's looking at Medicare benefits, they would be able to qualify for those benefits immediately as long as they meet the other qualifications.
And Dave, we do have a lot of questions that come in asking about spouses and what we can take care of. So any other recommendations as we talk about if spouses qualify and how we can help them better understand how to take care of this?
Yeah, what you really got to look at, especially when we're talking about government benefits, is there are a lot of spousal benefits available, especially from the Social Security side, from Medicare, that if you've got a spouse that may not qualify for their own benefits, that doesn't mean they're not going to get benefits, because they'll be able to get qualified for benefits based upon the individual's work record who qualifies. So you do want to look at those. You also need to consider children, especially if you got children under age 18 or 18 or under. They may qualify for some benefits as well if they're inside of your home. So don't overlook the benefits that others may get. Make sure you're doing your homework and that you're really searching out when it comes time to get these benefits for you yourself and maybe for your family.
Perfect. Dave, well, we had Peter James, and I'm hoping the next one on here is going to be John, but let's see if our next one is, oh, it looks like another James. I was hoping. So this one comes from another James, and it says, if I'm converting assets into the tax-free bucket after age 65, won't it cause my Medicare premiums to go up?
Yeah, so this is one of the big issues that people get concerned about is when you're doing a Roth conversion, especially if it's in retirement once you've gotten Medicare started, is that there are income limits that will cause your Medicare benefits to cost you more. So the current cutoff for a married couple is anything under 174,000 for modified adjusted gross income, you're going to pay the standard rate, which is like $145 a month. If you make over that, your benefits will go up, and the next area is like $202 a month. So something people need to consider when they're doing these conversions. They need to look at the breakpoints and make sure if they're doing them that they take into consideration the additional cost of their Medicare. But it's not something that we see a lot of people fall into because of the years we're using to do the conversion and how high these breakpoints are. But it definitely is something that needs to be calculated and taken into consideration.
And Dave, as we're talking about the tax-free bucket, explain that a little bit for those maybe who are new to the show today.
Yeah, what we're trying to do is eliminate the various risks in retirement. And one of the biggest risks facing people is that tax rates are going to be higher in the future. All we have to do is look around. We realize that based upon Social Security and Medicare costs, with all the baby boomers coming into the program and this increasing national debt, the government's got to pay for these benefits somehow. And they can either cut spending, which they're not doing, or they can raise taxes. So it's our belief that those taxes are going to be higher. There's a number of other reasons, even for those who think your tax bracket will be less or your income will be less in retirement, that we're finding that's not necessarily true because you lose deductions. You also are in a situation where you're needing more money, many of you, than you expect. So what we're trying to do is help them eliminate that tax rate risk as one of those risks of uncertainty. And that's the problem, is you have no idea what the government's going to charge you. They could charge you 10%, they could charge you 50%, and you have no control. You're just going to have to pay whatever they tell you that amount is once you get into a period of time where you're not necessarily making additional income.
And Dave, if they want to know more about this, where's the best place to get the resource to learn?
Best place to go is to our website. We have so many tools there. We've got access to all of our webinars, which now we've got 9 different webinars we teach on tax-free and risk-free retirement. We've got our podcasts. We've got, I think, 25 podcasts so far we've done on this topic. We've got access to various videos that are coming. We do these Facebook Live events and these YouTube Live events where you can get this information. So I would go there. We also have connections there where you can get connected with an advisor who can help walk you through the process.
Awesome. Dave, that's exactly what I needed to hear. All right, next I have Laura. And Laura says, can one person have several Roth IRAs?
Yes, you can have as many of these as you want. And one of the things that you need to look at, especially when we're talking about a Roth, and I would encourage anyone to do, if you don't have one and you're looking at transitioning money at some time in the future, is get one set up. There is a period of time that you've got to wait before you can pull money out without certain tax consequences. And that period's 5 years. So we recommend that people get one set up, even if you don't put a lot of money in it. Get it set up, get it seasoning, get it going. So when you hit a period of time that you need to take that money out, you're not having restrictions on how quickly you can access those funds. But you can set up as many of these as you want to. Now, for simplicity, many people are going to want to consolidate, but it's based upon what you're trying to accomplish and your desire to cover these various programs.
And Dave, you talk about the Roth IRAs, Roth conversions, a lot of these, and you actually have one of your previous podcasts on it. And like you said, just make sure you put some money in, just do something. Because I think right now we're so worried about the end result, about what we're going to have at the end, but we're not focused on what's happening right now in this very moment. And like you said, even if it's $50, that's very important that we do something today.
Well, and there's a big misunderstanding out there that if you pay taxes now, somehow that's going to cause you to have less money in the future. The only way it causes you to have less money in the future is if your tax rates go up. If they go up 1%, you have less money. It's not a matter of, hey, if I put more money in now, then somehow I end up with more money later. If tax rates are the same, you're going to pay all that money out. You're going to end up with the exact same money, no matter if it's in a Roth or a traditional account. But if you believe tax rates are going up at all, you've got to make that commitment now, pay that upfront fee, and then realize in retirement, you just have one less thing you have to worry about, which again is that uncertainty of what are they? I mean, if you're in retirement, you're living off fixed income, you're used to maybe a 10% tax rate, and then the government comes in and says, "Well, guess what? We're going to start charging you 20%." That just cut into your lifestyle, and you really have no way to make that up at that point.
And right now, tax rates are historically low right now. But what's going to happen is, I mean, with the election and everything else, I mean, we know exactly when it's going to go up, but right now things can change very quickly. But you're right. I don't ever see it changing backwards, but I think people need to understand that.
Yeah, our national debt is increasing at such a level that there's no way. Currently, we're at historically low interest rates as well. So we're able to pay the interest on that debt. The government's never going to pay that debt off. Unlike us who have home mortgages and stuff, where you would end up paying that mortgage off at some point, government's never going to pay that debt off based upon current trends. So that means they've got to be able to keep up with the interest. Well, there's a point that debt gets so large or the interest rates increase. Now you're in a position that you don't have enough tax revenue to be able to pay for it. So what do? At that point, now you've got to increase taxes because it's too late. That money's been spent. The interest is going to happen day after day, month after month, regardless. Now you can't cut spending because the spending's already been done. So now you do have to raise taxes to generate that extra revenue.
Dave, that's very insightful. And I appreciate that because I feel like that's one thing we continue to put off. We just keep waiting for tomorrow or the next day. And you and I have talked about this many times before. We've got kids in college. And so maybe that's another reason why we put it off and wait when our kids graduate, then we're going to start saving for retirement. But is that a hard process to put in place right now?
Well, it really is. And as we look at what's going on in the government does not want us to suffer. And I get that. We don't want to suffer. But if we're risking our future to take away some pains that we have now, is that really helping us? I have 6 children. There were times they had to go through some really bad consequences to become better kids. That was just part of the deal. Like right now, we've got a couple of boys that have had some issues and we've punished them for these issues. They're becoming better kids because of it, because they had consequences to their actions. So what we've got to look at is, are we taking responsibility in an effort to become better people ourselves and to become more responsible as we face the future?
Dave, my next question I have is from Louise. And she said, what about using a reverse mortgage as a line of credit? And now before you answer this, I want you to talk about what you did today.
Yeah, so this morning we had our first webinar on reverse mortgages. Very excited to put it together because so many people have questions about reverse mortgages. There's a lot of misunderstanding out there. Many people believe it's just a method for people to steal your home. And if not done correctly, it can be that. There's obviously bad people in every area, but we did our first webinar. We had over 850 people on that webinar. Great attendance, tons of questions, tons of interaction. Very excited to be able to share the information because when we look at reverse mortgages, they can be a great option for people, but it's like every other tool we talk about. It's got to fit the criteria. Just like a life insurance retirement plan, it can be great if you qualify, but if not, we've got to look at other options. So as we look at Louise's question here, what about using reverse mortgage as a line of credit? This can be a great option. And for most people who get reverse mortgages, this is how they use them, because you're not having to pay a bunch of interest on money until you end up needing to use it. So it's available, you've got everything set up. And then as you need either annual income or you have a shock or aspirational expense, you could be able to use those funds. But there is homework that should be done before ever getting involved in a reverse mortgage. They do have counseling that you have to go through because they want to make sure that you fully understand what you're getting into when you get into one of these.
And I appreciate you said that, talk about doing their homework, because a lot of times people can use a reverse mortgage, obviously for the wrong reasons, and other people take advantage of them. But I think it's really important that you bring up that we're making sure that we're doing our homework and we're talking to those people that can actually help and advise us in this, because this can become something that can ruin us completely, just like everything else we're working on.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest issues I believe we have as a country and as a government. We do not educate people enough on the basics of finance, the basic information. And the same here. You're going to have a counseling session to get a reverse mortgage. Why do you not have to go through a counseling session to get your Social Security, to get your Medicare, to get a regular mortgage? Why would you not want to go through all this to make sure people understand? Now, it's not to discourage them from necessarily doing it, but it's to help them understand the information. If I want to go buy something, theoretically, I'm going to educate myself first to make sure I'm buying what I want. But in retirement and when we talk about finances, that just often doesn't happen. And what's the consequence? The lowest segment of the population gets hurt the worst. And that's what's so painful for me is it's the people who can least afford to get hurt. They're the ones that get hurt because they can't afford advisors to help them get through the process.
Exactly. All right, Dave, my next question I have here comes from Robert. And Robert says, do you think Roth IRAs will be taxed in the future since the math of America is such a mess and Congress is unable to solve this problem?
So when we look at this, the biggest thing that you need to understand is that traditional IRAs account for 95% of retirement assets. So we're talking over $20 trillion. The Roth IRA only accounts for about 5%. So it's my belief, where's the government going to go? Do you go after the little tiny asset, or do you go after the big asset where you can generate high dollars? It's my belief that they're going to go after that big asset. And what you're going to find is the traditional IRAs and tax rates on those are going to be the increase. And I really don't see them going after the Roths. They were based upon laws that were established at the time. Again, it's not such a big pool of money that I get overly concerned that if you put money inside of there, you're going to have tax consequences. Again, remember, with any tax law change, usually there's a delayed period of time before it gets enacted. So this stuff's coming. So again, if there were a situation where you thought that was going to happen, liquidate the account, get your money out, and then figure out what you do from there. But personally, Robert, I don't see a big issue with that. I would see far bigger issues by keeping my money in that tax deferred bucket and having to worry what was going to happen in the future there when I get in my 70s or 80s and we have a national debt that instead of being $27 trillion, we're at 40 or $50 trillion.
And Dave, tell me about this, where it talks about the math of America is such a mess. I mean, I know David Walker talks about this a little bit, but tell me how this makes sense so people can understand what this means.
Yeah, it's one of the things we need to look at even now. We're during an election cycle, and many people ask, well, who should I vote for? They've all got different tax plans. They've all got a situation where they're going to change the tax system. Well, it's really irrelevant because the math's already been established. We're already so far in debt. Our unfunded liabilities are so large, especially when we consider Social Security and Medicare, that taxes are going to have to go up in the future to be able to cover those. So yes, short term, maybe it makes a difference, but when we look at it long term, especially over the next decade, it's my belief somewhere around 2030, we're going to see some major changes in what's happening because they're going to need to do it in order to stabilize Social Security, to stabilize Medicare, and to make sure we can continue to cover this debt that's continuing to increase.
That's perfect, Dave. That's what I was hoping for. And I want to see if we can squeeze in a few more questions here. And again, for those who are watching live, send your questions in. And for those watching on replay, thank you. We have so many people that watch on replay, and it's important that if you still have questions, even after watching this, jump on over to the website at theprosperityguy.com and submit your question there, and we'll answer those on future shows, either a webinar or on Facebook Live here, and even on the end of the podcast. We go through and answer 3 questions that Dave and I get to talk about, and so it's really important you be part of that. And Dave, so this comes from Jonathan. And I'm glad this one fit. My characters were running out of space here, so I've got a couple of these I'm hoping to make sure they fit. Jonathan says, doesn't the mortality cost of maintaining the life insurance really eat up cash value in your 70s and 80s, and thus prevent the LIRP, which is a life insurance retirement plan, from being a viable option during these years?
This is something that I'm glad we're talking about because there's some misunderstanding, I believe, in this question of what we're using the life insurance retirement plan for. So remember, when we talk about life insurance retirement plan, our primary purpose is to use the benefits of it during our lifetime. Either we're going to spend down our cash value as tax-free income to allow us to get through the retirement. We may use it for a long-term care event, the death benefit. So we're not trying to get a certain amount of death benefit. Now, if you're trying to transfer assets to your children or to someone else, we're not going to want to use a life insurance retirement plan the way we structure it. You're going to want to get a separate policy. And he's exactly right. So what we do with these policies is we're not increasing that death benefit over our lifetimes. What we do is we either do a level death benefit or a decreasing death benefit. So as you get older, your cash value goes up and then your insurance needs go down. Because your cash value goes up, you're having to buy less and less insurance. So that's what we're doing to solve the problem. But yes, if you had an increasing death benefit, an increasing cash value, that gap always stays the same, and that insurance can get very expensive. So it's really understanding the way the product's designed to work, what we're trying to use it for, and making sure that it's structured in a way to allow you to reduce those risks, because again, that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about necessarily asset transfer, which we can do that and people have a need, but we're talking primarily about using this to help people get through that retirement period that so many people are struggling with.
And Dave, you talk about reducing risk. What can we do right now to help those that are maybe in this retirement phase or headed to retirement? Because I'm sure right now that's the first thing on their mind.
Yeah, it really is. This is the problem that we have. So traditional financial planner, you're going to go in, you're going to sit down, and they're going to try to calculate the amount of money you need once you get into retirement. And this is going to be based upon your lifestyle expectation during retirement, how much Social Security money you may be getting. And they're going to determine the amount you need. And they're going to say, okay, you've got to invest $10,000 a year for the next 20 years, whatever that case may be. We'll build up a nest egg of X, and then you'll be able to withdraw an X dollar amount. Well, that's all fine and dandy, but it didn't address any of the risks. We didn't talk about any of the issues that we're having to deal with on the side regarding sequence of return risk once we get into retirement, inflation risk, withdrawal rate risk, longevity risk, long-term care risk, all of these things. And so the biggest thing we can do for anyone now, even if you're in retirement, is to start looking at the risks you're going to face and try to eliminate those now. We don't want to wait until we have the fire just outside of our house. If you're living in California, and I feel so bad for those that are, but all of a sudden you look out the window and you're like, oh, fire's just across the valley. And you get on the telephone and you call up your insurance company. It's like, hey, Bob, I need some fire insurance. Could you send me that application right now? I'll send the money over. We're going to get this thing covered. Well, that's not going to work. They're never going to insure you in that period of time. And it's the same with our retirement. The last thing that we want to do is wait until those risks are there, because it may be too late and you're not going to be able to solve them. So we want to look at what we can do now to solve those issues.
Yeah. And David, it hits close to home. I have a sister that was really close to those fires in California, and they basically were just a street away from it. And so when you talk about that, even for me, and I'm sure those that are watching it, it does hit close to home. And I feel like a lot of times I asked my sister, were you ready? And she said, well, I feel like financially we were ready, but for everything else we weren't. And I feel like in life, we are always like that. We feel like we're just living to that moment, and we really need to make sure we're living far beyond, because even talking about this question, what happens is we're trying to get to retirement, but you really talk about getting through retirement. And a lot of times we're like, yeah, we're covered up to this moment, but that's it. But we really are looking at beyond this because we're living longer.
Yeah, one of the biggest problems for mainstream financial advisors is there's not a lot of money in reducing risk in retirement, and it's not easy. It takes more complex planning. It takes more time, takes more effort. And so many of them just want to look at how they can build those assets, make money off of those assets. And not here to knock traditional financial planners. There's some great advisors out there. But what you need to make sure is that they're looking at these various risks. And that's one of the great things I love about our advisors is they have been trained, for many of them for decades, others for a number of years. They've gone through testing processes to ensure they understand the importance of reducing those risks so people can get through retirement in the best possible situation they can get through it in.
And Dave, thank you so much for answering that. I've got one or two more I'm going to try to squeeze in here. This one is the one that we almost got it all in. So I'm going to read this one from Philip. He says, why is nobody addressing the cost of Medicare and what the pharmacy industry charges for prescriptions? That seems to be a better target for balancing Medicare 7, making the Social Security benefits go further.
Okay. So yeah, looking at this, what he's talking about is saying, why are we not really addressing the medical costs that are occurring out there? We're outpacing inflation. It's going crazy. Well, they are addressing it. We see that they're trying to reduce these costs. It's one of the things that Medicare is responsible for, trying to maintain costs. And I agree. We've got to figure it out. They could do better. They could do more to get these costs down. But as you look at it, the bigger problem really is the sheer numbers that are coming into the program. Again, average of 10,000 people a day. It's increasing because more retirees have waited, but we've got an average of 10,000 baby boomers coming onto the program each day. And when you look at deaths in the United States, we've got 2.7 million people on average dying. So we end up with about 6,000 people a day going off of the program. And again, that's assuming that they were all retirees, which they're not. There's some younger people inside of there. So we've got, say, 6,000 people going off. So every year, 4,000 more people just continue to get added. And this is where we see the big issue. But Philip, I completely agree. The more we can do to reduce those costs, to streamline those, to get pharmaceuticals to a point where the drug costs are average. I think I talked about, I don't know if I talked about this on here. I know we've talked about it some. I had my transplant in Puerto Rico. My insurance covered all but a couple of $100. That's all I had to pay. It was $160,000, $170,000 for my transplant. I think it was the total bill. By the time you included my donor, it was well over $200,000 to $300,000. I paid a few $100. I had to have one blood test afterwards, or that they did. I paid over $500 just for that one blood test, and I had to have it done multiple times. And so he's right. There's some issues here. It's like, hey, how can I get $165,000 to $300,000 value, pay hardly anything, and then all of a sudden I've got to get some blood work done, or get even my medications. Medications now are approximately $1,000 a month. So it is a big issue. And Philip, I feel for anybody that's stuck in this situation where they're having to pay it themselves, but it is something they're trying to work on.
Yeah, this is a big issue. I mean, I look at, even for me right now, I've got a child that needs an EpiPen. And I feel like every time I go in there, I have to battle or try to use something like GoodRx or something in order to find another solution, because those costs keep raising. Even blood work, same like that. So Dave, I really appreciate that. And I wanted to touch on one point you talked about also is we have more of the baby boomers coming on, but they're not necessarily leaving the program by death as much. And so why is that? I mean, we talk about longevity, but are people really understanding this?
Yeah. So a couple of things. I mean, one is sheer numbers, the fact that the number of people at the age 62, 65, 68 is much higher. But also we've got a situation where medicine's getting better. You know, they're able to keep us alive much longer. And so even though you're living longer, you may not be living necessarily any healthier. And you may have a number of health issues that you're having to deal with. So, and these are all things you've got to consider. We have our Medicare class where we talk in great detail about the program and how it works. I would encourage anyone to take that class if you want to better understand Medicare. Now, if you're on the program, you may not get as much benefit as if you're going on to the program, so you can understand how the various aspects of it work. But it's a huge issue. CR, this is one of the biggest concerns that we have, because for an average married couple, the statistics show now over $250,000 they're going to have to spend through the retirement for Medicare or medical costs, not Medicare, but medical costs themselves. That's a huge commitment when you talk about people that are on fixed income.
Yeah. And I appreciate that, because what we're trying to do is help educate. And that's why we're here. That's why we're on Facebook Live, YouTube, Instagram, also on webinars or podcasts, because I feel like there's too many people out there that don't understand this. And Dave, your job and my job is to help make sure we get this out there. So we're hitting the people that are saying, what do I do? How do I take care of this and move forward?
Yeah. And the problem is with all of these programs, if you don't understand them, and even including your own retirement, you're going to make a bunch of bad decisions, and not intentionally. It's just going to happen. That if you allow the system to push you through and allow you to take advantage of what's there, they're not going to look out for your best interest. They're not going to be saying, hey, wait a second, I think you could get an additional $10,000 if you did this. I think you could get better coverage if you did that. They're not there to tell you that. They're order takers. It's like when you go to the restaurant or to the fast food place and you're going through the drive-through. Yeah, they're going to recommend something initially to make more money or help buy you in. But once you get through there, they're not going to be trying to talk you through what might be best for you. Hey, do you have heart conditions? Do we need something low sodium? Should we get you a salad today, maybe instead of that burger? They're not going to do that. They're going to allow you to make your decisions. And in one sense, that's one of the great things about America. We have our freedoms. The other sense, it can be a big problem because you can often leave a lot of money on the table.
Exactly. Well, Dave, I want to end with the last question from Kevin here, and then we'll end our show. But it says, Kevin asks, is there a limit to rolling over a Roth 401k, 403b into a Roth IRA?
There is no limit. You can transfer as much as you want. That's been taken off. That there used to be some conversion limits. Now there's not, and more so based upon your income. But now anyone can roll over as much as they want. There are two things you've got to take into consideration, though. Number one, oftentimes, if you are still working, and most times, if you are still working, they're not going to allow you to move that money out of your employer plan. So you're going to have to wait until you separate from employment. And number two, be very careful. The last thing you want to do if you've got substantial amounts of money, for most people, is transfer all of that amount in 1 year, because what you're going to do is put yourself into a situation where you probably doubled your tax rate already just by doing the transition. So although there are no limits, certain things you definitely want to be aware of and be cautious of.
And Dave, that wraps up the show for today, but I wanted to jump on and let people know about what we have coming up here. So first of all, we have the podcast. Tell me a little bit about your podcast.
Yeah, so the podcast is there. It's usually about 30 minutes on average. Sometimes it goes a little longer, sometimes a little less, but it's designed to help you better understand the topics that we talk about through our webinars, through these Facebook Live events where we're getting questions and answers. They're released every Friday. This week, we are talking about real estate. One of the interesting topics CR brought up is people often ask, should I own real estate in retirement? I talk about some of the reasons why I believe if you're trying to get to a tax-free and risk-free retirement, you shouldn't own real estate. But again, if you disagree with everything I say, at the end of that show, I'm going to give you a recommendation of something you can do to allow you to still take advantage of the benefits we talk about, but it's definitely not a system that's set up for everyone.
And Dave, we also have our webinars, and you mentioned earlier before, you have 9 webinars, and you recently taught the understanding reverse mortgages today for the first time. And so where can they go to get the rest of these, all 9 of these?
Yes. So the best place is to go to our website, theprosperityguy.com. If you'll go to our events page there, even on our homepage, it's going to show our upcoming events. Tomorrow, we've got Look Before You Alert presentation. Then on Friday, I'm teaching my basic Social Security class. So this is going to cover just the basics. We do have a 2-hour premium class that's coming up towards the end of the month, where we will talk in detail about all of the bin points, the way it's calculated, all those details that you'd really want to know. But I do recommend that you attend these. We get great reviews on all these webinars, tons of great questions, and it's just a great format to be able to educate yourself on your retirement.
And Dave, our very last thing I want to push on here is because we talk about making sure we're taking care of the steps now. We want to make sure we're meeting with an advisor. So we want to talk about setting up a strategy session. And what is this for?
Yeah, so what we do is we have partnered up with a handful of advisors. Again, as I mentioned earlier in the show, these are guys who have gone through a training process, some of them for decades, others for a number of years, and then they get certified through a testing process to make sure they understand the concepts that we teach and they understand how to help people get to a tax-free and risk-free retirement. All of these guys offer a free consultation to allow you to sit down with them and go through your retirement, see where you're at, and to explain how they could help you get yourself to a tax-free and risk-free retirement. To access a strategy session with any of these guys, you can go through our website where you'll be able to get an appointment scheduled with them. We're going to ask for some information just to make sure we get you to the right advisor who can help you the most. But a very simple process and a great opportunity for you to take what you've learned and be able to get with these individuals. Now, one last thing I will say before you meet, you can schedule your appointment, but I encourage you to get as much education as you can before you meet with these advisors, because they're going to be talking about a life insurance retirement plan. They're going to be talking about the power of zero, why we need to get to a tax-free retirement. All of these things are taught through my webinars, through my podcast. So I do encourage you to take some time, go through these classes, make sure you understand the basics. So as they're talking to you, you can get the most out of that meeting, and they can best help you understand how you can get to safe and secure retirement for yourself.
Awesome. Dave, thank you so much for spending a half hour with us going through answering questions on retirement. Again, if you're watching this as a replay, please go through and send a question to us at theprosperityguy.com through the contact page. And Dave will be able to answer that question on probably one of our next podcast or Facebook Live events. And please join him on the webinars. And those are very important things. Like Dave said, make sure you get the proper education. This isn't something we're just throwing out there for you to just quickly pick up and do. It takes time, it takes planning. And that's the important piece of what we're trying to talk about, is educating you before you make that decision. So you know exactly what decision will work for you and your family, because not everything's built to be exactly the same. It's not a cookie cutter process. This stuff is set aside to help you and your family, not only to get to retirement, but through retirement. And Dave, thanks so much for being here.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Okay, we'll see you guys next Wednesday at 11 a.m. Central Time. Send your questions. And if you have anything else, you can always reach out to us at theprosperityguy.com, and we'll see you then.